Welcome back to another episode of Hopline and a long-term review of this Slingshot One-Lock system. I've had it for a couple of months now, but still every time I rock up at a spot, I get a lot of questions. And in this video, I'm just gonna try to answer the most common questions and give you a little bit more of an insight on the Slingshot foil lineup for 2025. I still remember when I saw this Slingshot One-Lock system for the first time, and I was a reel on Instagram from AWSI 2024. And I think the buzzwords of AWSI were foil drive and Slingshot One-Lock. And it caught my interest, and shortly after I got a call from Slingshot and they asked if I wanted to have a demo unit without any obligations, not even making a review. And I said yes, not only because of the One-Lock, but also because of the new foils. And some of you might know I do have a background with Slingshot foils. I learned on the Infinity 84. I progressed with the PTM 926 into the PTM 930, 899, 825. So I kind of know the cosmos, the Slingshot world, and I was very much interested in how the glide and the new foils ride and work combined with the new Slingshot One-Lock system. So by now I really used the Slingshot One-Lock system for a really good amount of time, different spots, different locations, different boards and setups, and I do keep getting the same questions. And the first one is always, how does it work? The second one is, how does it work on a long run? And then they ask about the performance of the One-Lock system in the water and the performance and comparison of the new front wings towards the old Phantasm series. So let's start with number one, and this is how it works. You've probably seen it, but I'm just gonna show it real quick. But I do wanna point out a few more things. So it's pretty easy and super straightforward. I've handed the system to maybe 20, 25 people. I never explain a single thing. I just hand them the gear and every single one was able to figure it out. I've got the R.T.S system, the track system, the rapid track system mounted to the mast. And if you look at that, there's just a hole in here. And that has the shape of kind of like a triangle. Let's put it that way. And now on the front wings, and this is the Glide series, you've got more or less the same triangle shape and this little thingy dingy that locks in, which is called the One-Lock. So if you slide this in, it's flush in here, just like that, and that's pretty much it. Now I'm just gonna grab a stabilizer from here, and you can see it's more or less the same triangle shape, and this just sits on top. And this is something people sometimes don't understand. If you have sand in the system, this is going to be pushed out a little bit more because then there's going to be sand in between. But because you can adjust the tension, it's not really a problem. And the same with wear over time. If they rub on each other and you're losing a little bit of material or within the material, you can just adjust this little string, the tension of the string, and then it sits super stiff again. So you slide it in here, and this is already a very solid construction. And now all you have to do is put this in here and slide it, and that's it. And if you want to take it apart, it's just the other way around. You open this one, and now because this one is a pretty tight fit to make it a solid and stiff system, you have to wiggle a little bit, and you might have to put your foot on the board and then just keep wiggling and pulling, and you can pull it out. It's a matter of seconds, and it really is. And now I just keep wiggling here a little bit, and you can slide this in or just pull it out, and that's it. It works on a regular basis. It works day in and day out for me. Question number two, how good does it last on a long run? And I can only speak for a very good amount of sessions in a couple of months, but I can see a little bit of wear right here where the monoblock tail and the front wing slides into the mast hole. It's not a problem because they sit on each other and they move on each other. If there's a little bit of wear, you just have to adjust the tension of this one a little bit. And at the same time, I think I will be more or less dead and buried before this becomes a problem. So I'm really confident it's a really good solution, and at the same time, this is replaceable. And I'm always a fan of things you can replace, adjust, and repair. And there's a little Allen key hole right here, so you can unscrew this. This is a spare part, just buy a new one. It's probably gonna be expensive, but still, you can fix it and you can repair it if it becomes a problem. The mast itself looks super solid, and this is still pre-production, but I don't have any problems here. This still looks like, yeah, brand new, and I think it's very, very well engineered, very streamlined, and it looks tough. I had a little concern because this is a pure carbon construction with the tolerances, but it's a perfect fit. It's not wobbling at all. It feels very stiff in the water, and I don't have any problems so far. So how does it perform in the water? And I just want to set it up one more time to answer this question. And there's one thing I was actually concerned about at the beginning when I saw it for the first time. This is a monoblock, so the front wing and the fuselage are kind of meld together, very streamlined, very efficient. Now, if you slide this in here, it's a perfect fit. But if you slide in the tail, and the tail itself is like another monoblock, so the connection here is very streamlined. But if you put this on top, there's a little bit of a gap here. And that's something I already saw on the reel on Instagram at AWSI. And I was like, wow, that could produce some turbulences. But this is where turbulences matter the least, and you can't feel it. The minute I went into the water, I could feel how streamlined and how effortless this ride, and it really does. So talking about performance, it feels very direct, very stiff, and very streamlined. It just feels a little bit more efficient than anything I had before. It's not much, but you can tell the difference. I handed it to a friend and asked him, I didn't say anything, I was like, just try it. He tried it, and the front wing was too big for him, and maybe that's a little bit too long, so it felt a little bit on track compared to what he usually rides. But he was like, yeah, it's too big for me. It's very on track, but it feels very streamlined. And I was like, yeah. And then later on I showed him, I was like, could you feel that? And he was like, no, I can't. So I was concerned about this little gap because that's the only non-optimized and streamlined position in the whole system, but it does not really matter, and it doesn't affect how easy and good and effortless it rides in the water. So how does it perform in the water? It performs the same, or it performs better than the Phantasm series. So you have the benefit of setting this up within seconds, and you have a more streamlined, and they say stiffer system. It is stiff, it is very stiff. I don't know if it's any stiffer because I'm only 65 kilograms. I never had a problem with the Phantasm series. So some people say that they could produce a wobbling, and they can't with the One-Lock system. The Phantasm series, the old one, was perfectly fine in terms of stiffness for me, and this one is too. So I'm not having any problems. And from what I heard from other riders, heavier riders, they don't have any problems with the stiffness in the system. So let's talk about the front wings and how they compare to the old ones. I'm going to start with the stabilizer, and I only had the Turbotail 180, which is very close to the old Turbotail 180. I think it's more or less the same shape. Because of the monoblock, it's a little bit more streamlined, and you can feel and tell it's a little bit more streamlined. Other than that, it feels more or less identical. It's got a very good stability, turns nice. I wish it was a little bit smaller. I really like the old 325 on the Phantasm series, and I wish, or I hope, they are coming up with a shorter fuselage, because this one is just a little bit too much on track for me. I really enjoy riding it. I think it's perfectly good for a little heavier riders or people progressing. But for me, it could be just a little bit shorter, because that's what I'm used to have a little bit more freedom in the pitch, in jumps and in the pumping. But I'm pretty sure Slingshot's gonna come out with a lot more choice in the future. So that's really nice. The next one is the Glide 1125, and that was just too big for me. And the first time I was on a wingfoil session, I just felt that I could almost pump this forever. And that's what I did. I went out on a pump session and it was dock start first try. This is how much lift this one creates. It's roughly a meter in span, but it's very stable. It's still fast and turny, so it's a pretty good compromise. I would call it a mid aspect ratio is close to 9, 8.9, and that's a very nice combination of lift and speed and turniness at the same time. They are very close to the old PTM series, maybe a little bit more towards the G series, but I think they are really comparable to the PTM, and I really like the PTM. This one was just too big for me. I could pump it forever on a dock start and wing foiling, but I also got the Glide 725, and that was way more what I usually ride. It still had a lot of lift, even in 10, 11 knots with a 4.5 square meter wing. I was able to pump this up to keep going. It's more radical in turns, it's a little bit faster, and it's a really nice wing, except paired with the turbo tail, and they just make up a very long fuselage. I used to be on, I think it's 702 on the long fuselage back when I was riding the Phantasm system, but now I usually ride 65 or 60 centimeters. So this was just a little bit too stable for me, mainly in the pitch for pumping and for jumping and taking off. But I kind of hope they're coming up with something. And I think if you're a little heavier rider, this is not a problem as it was for me. So that's a really nice combination. I really enjoyed this wing. I think the 725 would be my favorite. It's got a little bit of thickness to it, a little bit of chamber, still provides a lot of lift. So this would be, for me, this would be a one front wing quiver. Like I said, I could ride this from maybe 10 knots to 20 knots. I could surf this. It pumps really nice. And again, it's got an aspect ratio of 8.9, so it's like a mid aspect wing. And I think a lot of people are gonna love this. In terms of riding, there's one thing I had in every single Slingshot foil, back from the Infinity Phantasm series to the Glide One-Lock series, and that's how they feel and how they give feedback on the front foot. They do ride with a little bit more pressure on the front foot, and that's something I personally really like, because I think it gives you a little bit more feedback and a little bit more control in turns, and you can feel and steer the foil just a little bit better. And if I have foils that don't have that much front foot pressure, it's hard for me to swap from one to the other, and I tend to move the foil without the front foot pressure just a little bit more forward to gain a little bit more lift and get a little bit more control in my turns, especially in waves. On the PTM series, going from the 930 to the 825, I had to move my whole system roughly 4.5, 5 centimeters forward to have a similar feel. And that's what I did when I stepped down from the 1125 Glide on the Slingshot One-Lock system to the 725. And I had to go back to the beach and swap it back and move it back the 5 centimeters because it feels almost identical in the same position. And I made a lot of tests, and the perfect position for me on the 1125 and on the 725 is only like 4 or 5 millimeters apart. So you could have the same settings, and that's really handy if you're using the rapid track system. Let me grab this one real quick. It's these little kind of hooks you screw onto your board, and then the mast just slides into the system. You just slide it in the track. You've got these little noses right here. They slide under, and then you have just very toolless kind of little screws, and you can lift them at the end and just line them up with your board, and that works really fine. And because they are engineered, I actually called Slingshot and asked them about it, and they said, yes, that's part of our R&D, and that's part of the development. We wanted this one to sit in the same position and have a very similar, if not the same feel, if you're dropping down from a bigger front wing to a smaller one. And it works, and that's something I really appreciate, especially if you're using that one. And you could, if you wanted to, you could just use 4 of these toolless screws, and then you can adjust the position of the foil on the go in the water. Just unscrew it, slide it a little bit forward or backward. So I think Slingshot really carried on the DNA of the old Phantasm series, making it a little bit more high performance and streamlined, but at the same time, the spectrum one front wing covers is really big, and I think you could make a whole quiver with maybe just 2 or 3 front wings. Downwinding, pumping, light wind winning, they have a big area covered, just one front wing by itself. Like I said, the 725, except for maybe pumping or dock starting, this could be a whole quiver. I usually have a lot of front wings and I love swapping wings, but I remember back in the days when I was riding the Phantasm series, the first one I rode as a single front wing quiver doing everything was the PTM 926, 926, and that was the one I could do anything with. It wasn't high performance in terms of speed in the wave, and that's why I dropped it at some point, but it was just covering a huge area. And I think this is something we see in the Glide series, something we have seen in the Phantasm series that's been carried on towards the Glide series. A little bit more streamlined, a little bit more high performance, but still covering a super wide spectrum. And there's one more thing I want to talk about, a question mainly from people that are already invested into the Slingshot Cosmo, into the Phantasm series, and they ask me, is there anything I can carry on into the new system from the Phantasm series into the One-Lock series, maybe with an adapter or something? And unfortunately, there is not, which is a pretty bold move from Slingshot. If you remember, Subfoil introduced the Kraken system and you only had to replace your mast. You could still use your fuselage front wing stabilizers, but this time actually there's nothing you can take on, which is hard, and I do understand it's hard for people that are invested into a system. I have the same with the Puma system from Subfoil, which I love and like. But it's discontinued and no one's going to buy it probably. I still love it. So if you have a Phantasm series, ride it as long as you want, as long as you can. And if you want to swap, think about the One-Lock system. I think, like I said before, it's a really bold move, because if there's nothing you can carry on, you might as well change to another brand. And a lot of people try, or brands try, to tie us to their Cosmos, and so Slingshot is actually giving up a lot of consumers, and I'm not sure if this is paying off. We'll see, the future will tell, but at the same time there's one little positive aspect I can see in this, and this is, if they are doing something like this, they really believe in the system and in the future of the system, and they're really confident it works. So I think they have done a great bit of engineering to come up with the Slingshot One-Lock system, and they believe in the system, not only for a season, not only for a year, but probably something on the long run. And as far as I can tell from my sessions I had, I really see the potential in the system. And for me, one thing I really enjoyed was setting up the foil in winter with gloves and without the screws. I don't mind if it takes 20 seconds or 10 seconds. If I use another quick system, there's other systems on the market. The One-Lock is for sure the fastest one, but it's the only one not using and not relying on screws. And that was something during the winter, riding to the spot. I usually have different gloves. I take gloves I can work with, and then I have different gloves I ride in the water. And I could just dress at home, get into my wetsuit, put on the gloves, like the lobster ones where you can handle screws and screwdrivers, and I could easily, in less than 10 seconds, without even getting cold, set up the One-Lock system, ride, come back, take it apart, and be back in my warm car or at home faster than I have ever before. So would I recommend the Slingshot One-Lock system to you? And I'm not going to make any recommendations, because I think it's a very hard and personal decision and based on a lot of factors. If you are heavily invested into another brand or into the Slingshot Phantasm Cosmos, and there's nothing you can take into the Slingshot One-Lock system, that's a very hard move. But at the same time, if you like the riding style of the Slingshot foils of the old series, you will enjoy these ones for sure, or even better, because they're a little bit more high performance. They still have the nice feel, turnability, agility, and that little extra front foot pressure, which I really like. They're a little bit more streamlined. The system itself is just the fastest one on the market, I think, so far in terms of setting up. And because Slingshot decided to make this bold move into the One-Lock, leaving everything behind, I think they're very serious about this system, about the R&D, having the best solution on the market, and we will see, or hopefully see, and I guess there's going to be a lot more front wings, gear and option for the One-Lock Cosmos. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's going to be heaps more reviews, tests and tips, so make sure to follow my channel, and I'm very much looking forward to see you here back again very soon. Take care.